It was 2013. My health was declining through 2012. I had no inkling it was cancer. I'd been eating very poorly, not exercising, not getting enough sleep, working long hours, a lot of stress up for work. Until January, I was just so ill. I was very overweight from all the poor diet and eating properly. And I just had so many symptoms. The symptoms just kept increasing. There was swelling under the ears, swelling under the arms, headaches, fatigue, anxiety, nausea. I had a massive rash on my lower left leg, a massive lump on my back, and stabbing pains 24/7 in my lower right abdomen. And I had tremors. I was shaking. I was in a really, really bad way. But again, because it was all over the body, I had no idea that it could be cancer, because I always thought, well, that would be isolated. If you had pain, and I know not all cancer patients have pain, but I thought if you had it, it'd be in one specific part of the body. But that was not the case for me. It was everywhere. And I should add that I also discovered the diagnostics that my liver was in very, very bad condition. Barely functioning, actually, was so bad. So really I was battling two things. The tumor in my right kidney, 6.5 centimeters diameter, and then this liver, which was barely functioning. That might account for the rash and the lumps and all that sort of thing. So it was late January. I've been avoiding going to a doctor because I'm not really a big fan of doctors or all the drugs and everything. But it just got so bad, and the tremors were getting so bad. I actually thought I had a neurological disorder. So I went to my local GP at the local medical centre, and he arranged a series of tests, blood tests, obviously a whole series of them, not just one, urine, feces, ultrasound. All of them showed absolutely nothing, and he even said, "I think you're okay." I said, "I'm not okay. I can assure you, I feel like I'm dying. I'm so sick." And he said, "All right, well, let's try again." He arranged another blood test. But when I was at the pathology lab, they took the initiative of asking me if it's okay if they did a CT scan. I agreed to it, and when the result came back, the GP said, "Well, there appears to be a large lump in your right kidney." And I said, "Lump? Do you mean carcinogenic or benign?" He said, "Well, it says possible renal carcinoma. I'm not an expert. I can arrange for you to see a specialist first thing tomorrow morning," which he did. So I saw the specialist, who was a urologist, first thing on Friday morning, 9 a.m, nervous as hell, thinking, "Oh my God, I think I'm going to die." The day before I'd been crying, couldn't sleep during the night. So very worried, very anxious. The specialist was pleasant, and he held the scans up to the light, not even a light box, and said, "I can tell you, you have renal carcinoma. You have cancer, a tumor in your right kidney." And I didn't want to believe it. "Are you sure?" "Well, 99% sure." I said, "Well, how can we be 100% sure?" He said, "Well, you'd have to do a biopsy. There are risks involved in that where it could spread the cancerous cells to other parts of the body. So I wouldn't recommend it, and I'm pretty sure this is what it is." And he said, "I recommend surgery next week." This is on a Friday. He said, "I can fit you in on the Tuesday." Well, I said to him, "I'd like to think about it." And he said, "I wouldn't think about it too long." And that gave me a very bad feeling. That raised suspicions. I felt like I was being coerced, and it made me want to think about it even more. I had the opposite effect of what he was intending, I think. This was at a hospital in Sydney called Randwick, Prince of Wales Hospital, Randwick. Walked down the escalator into the street, and again broke down crying and thought, "Oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm so young, I've so much life to live. I can't believe this is happening. Bad things happen to other people, not to me." I'd had a fairly fortunate life up to that point. My business was doing well, lots of friends. I loved music, perform music, and it was the last thing in the world that I'd expect. So anyway, I called a friend of mine by the name of Michael Adamides, who's a psychotherapist who helped me back in the 90s when I had pretty serious emotional issues. And he's about 10 years older than me, and I look at him as an older, wiser counsel. Even though he's not a doctor and he's not a naturopath, he's none of those things. He's a therapist, but he believes the mind and the body are intimately related, as I do. So I trusted him. "This is the diagnosis, Michael. What do I do?" He said, "Number one, don't get the surgery." And I was quite surprised by that, because to be so definitive, normally he's the sort of person who'd say, "Look, it's your decision and you've got to weigh up the options." But he said, "Do not get the surgery." I said, "Why not?" He said, "It's very invasive, puts the whole body under whack. It's not just a matter of they cut it out and life goes on as normal." He said, "It's a decision you could regret forever." This was his opinion, one person's opinion. And I listened to him, and I was inclined to believe that for the moment, for the time being. I said, "Well, what do I do?" He said, "I know an integrated doctor that works in the same building in Annandale where I conduct my psychotherapy. He's got a very good track record for curing people of cancer. And I said, curing? Hang on, curing? Do you mean like extending the life? He said, no, curing, 100%. He said, there are people he's treated and will alive 15, 20 years later with perfect health, and the scans show the tumour is completely gone. And I said, it's extraordinary. He said, yes, but in Australia we've got laws, we're not allowed to advertise that you can cure cancer. I heard about Dr. Chris, the integrative doctor, by word of mouth, and he keeps a low profile. In fact, there's certain things that he's very discreet about, things he keeps himself. I was able to get an appointment with him that very same day. So it's all happening very fast. You've got the GP late on a Thursday afternoon. You've got the specialist 9 a.m. on Friday morning. And then I would see Dr. Chris, the integrative doctor, at 2 p.m. the same day. It's all happening at the speed of light, which was good in a way because I really wanted to get on to it. Even though I was very anxious, overwhelmed in fact, with anxiety, I thought, I'm going to beat this. This is my attitude. I did not think, oh, well, when your time's up, your time's up. I'll just resign myself to this. Because I know some people do. And by the way, if they do, that's their prerogative. We all have freedom of choice. And I know people who have said that. In my case, I didn't feel that way. I felt I'm only young. 55, I feel young. I want to get to 100. I want to get past 100 with top physical and mental health, by the way. I saw Dr. Chris, and you walk into his clinic and it's more like a science fiction movie set than a doctor's office. It's got all these electronic contraptions that I'd never seen before. And even when he told me the name, I'd never heard of them before. He said, this is a hunter metapathy. I said, what on earth's that? It was invented and created in Russia, I think, originally, although the Germans also got onto similar technology. It's where they're able to scan every organ in your body without using any radiation. And so you put on these headphones, which are not audio headphones. They actually pick up the radiation or EMF emanating from your brain. It doesn't put radiation into your brain, it takes it out of your brain based on the principle that your brain knows the state of health of every organ in your body. The brain is an extraordinary organ. So anyway, I put it on. I didn't tell him. He said, what's your issue? I said, well, how about you try and find out? You tell me. So I was being a bit cheeky. I was testing his equipment. If his equipment's so good, he should be able to tell me. So he went through and he said, your gallbladder's fine, your heart's fine, your lungs are fine, brain is fine, organ by organ. And then he said, oh, your left kidney's fine, but your right kidney seems to be in serious trouble there. So I don't know what it is, but they're coming up to 6s. Everything's rated from 1 to 6 on the computer screen, on the monitor, 1 being the best of health, 6 being the worst of health. He said it's coming up as 5s and 6, meaning it's in very, very poor state. In fact, he said, you're in a very dangerous predicament here. What's that all about? And I said, well, I can tell you now I was diagnosed with cancer in my right kidney. He said, well, that makes sense. Look at the screen, that's what it's showing. And then I started to have faith in this machine. At first I thought, this is very strange, this equipment. And then he said, and your liver's in serious trouble. I said, no, they didn't pick up on that with any of the pathology lab tests or the scans. He said, well, look here. He said, it's all 4s and 5s and some 6s. Not quite as bad as your kidney, but it's in deep, deep trouble. So anyway, to cut the story short, he said, well, we're going to get you onto all these supplements. He said, I only want you to eat organic food, none of this sprayed stuff and stuff that's dangerous. It might have contributed to you getting to this point, and we've got to clear all the obstacles that are in the way to allow your body to heal itself. And this is the first person I've heard say, your body heal itself. I said, body can't heal itself of cancer, can it? He said, I'm of a firm belief that it can, and I operate under that principle. I said, wow, that's so interesting. I later found out from a young fellow called Marco, who actually collaborated with me on the book. He said, have you heard of the cytotoxic T cells in the white blood? I said, not at all. He said, have a look at this video made by Cambridge University using an electron microscope. And it runs for 2 minutes. It was showing these are the T cells. You can see the T cells locating cancer cells and then injecting them with this poison. And apparently they've got close to 100% success rate, only killing the bad cells, which also includes bacteria and viruses and protozoa, things that shouldn't be there, and almost 100% success in killing them. I said, this is fantastic. I said, is that the cure for cancer? He said, that is a major part of what I believe is the cure for cancer. He said, everybody's got cancer cells in their body and everybody's got T cells that are fighting off this cancer from the day we're born. And I said, well, then why do we get sick? He said, well, it's when the army of T cells is depleted and we need to build up the army of T cells. He said, you're asking all the right questions. Keep going. I said, well, how do you build up the army of T cells? He said, you're already onto it to a great extent, but you need to go further. And I think, by the way, if I can blow my own trumpet, I think that's part of the reason for my success. I went full hog. I don't know if you've got that expression over there. Full bore, 100% dedicated, not half-hearted, He also said, no sugar at all. Do not touch it with the proverbial 10th hole. And no processed foods. I said, I've already eliminated processed foods and I've cut down on the sugar. He said, it's all about boosting your immune system to the highest possible level, which is largely these T cells. And I've got to say, I have to help some wonderful, amazing, insightful people who I think you're attracted, because there's an old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I had no conscious intention of losing weight, although obviously that was always desirable, but without even trying, when I least expected it, and it wasn't through illness. It wasn't the illness which was shedding off the weight, was the super healthy food, the organic food, getting off all the crap food. Also, might I say, the night before I got my diagnosis with the specialist, I quit alcohol because I've been drinking very heavily. I'm not ashamed to say, because I actually look at that person as a different person who's speaking to you now. Different outlook on life, different perspectives, different habits, different values. I haven't touched alcohol for, 9.5 years now, which is since my diagnosis. I cut out a lot of things out of my diet. In my book, I actually outlined 14 categories of food I eliminated from my diet, and then a whole range of foods that I focused on my diet. Was studied done in Quebec. They did laboratory studies where they listed the 15 most powerful cancer-fighting foods. Top of the list, I think, was garlic, and then there's broccoli and onion and kale. My favorite form of exercise became running at the world-famous Bondi Beach. It's just so uplifting. What I would do is swim one length of the beach, which is about 1 kilometre, and then run back to my towel 1 kilometre. But it was more than just the exercise. It was the salt water, and I believe the minerals even get through the pores of your skin and have a healing effect. The fresh air, the sunshine, the seagulls swimming past, sometimes they almost hit your face, but you laugh and it's uplifting. Anything that's joyful. One of my heroes is an American scientist called Dr. Bruce Lipton, who I'm sure you've heard of. A brilliant man. I think he's a wonderful human being too. And he wrote a book, The Biology of Belief, which I love, where he put forward, again, a rather radical, controversial theory that we can actually switch out genes on or off. And he believes 90% of cancer is not genetic. I didn't know about this at the time I was on my recovery path, but I'm fascinated by his theory, where he says that if you're thinking stressful thoughts, if you're in fight and flight mode, your brain instructs the body to release stress hormones into the bloodstream, which cause you to become sick or remain sick. Conversely, if you think joyful, happy, loving thoughts, which might also involve forgiving them, which may to some people sound like it's nothing to do with cancer recovery, but I believe it had a major part in my cancer recovery. When you think these loving thoughts toward yourself and other people, the brain instructs the body to release healing hormones in your body, which are things like oxytocin and vasopressin and human growth hormone. And there's one other, the dopamine, I think, trigger the body into healing mode. So it's back to the basic fundamental thesis. The body, I believe, is a powerful self-healing organism if given the right support and the right opportunities. And you really got to give it a big helping hand. You can't just sit back and think, oh, it's going to do it for me. You can't be complacent about it. So being at the beach put me in a joyful state. I'd go down sometimes feeling quite ill, but thinking, I've got to do this. It's discipline. You know it's right, and you force yourself to do it. Even when you're thinking, I'd rather just sit in a comfy chair. I'd rather sit in my office in front of my computer. No. I've made a promise to myself, I'm going to do this, and it's a sunny day, and I'm going to get down and I'm going to exercise. And by the end of my regime, I felt on top of the world. And I thought, what's this all about? I've gone from being a sick person to someone who feels pretty damn good. What is that about? And so just experience, I didn't need books or people to tell me. Experience told me that I was on the right track with that. I went to this integrated Dr. Chris, who was good, I would say, not sensational, but good. And, with his supplements, getting on into organic food, various other things. And 2 months after being on his regime, I thought, I'm going to get another scan because I think I'm feeling a lot better, but I want some tangible verification that the tumour has shrunk. So I went back to Dr. Will, the British GP who I'd seen in the first place, and he arranged the scans. When they came back, he said, well, I've got some good news and some bad news. I went, oh, it's such a cliche. It's like a movie, the typical thing you hear on a movie script. He said, what do you want to hear first? I said, well, give me the bad news. It can only get better from there. He said, the bad news is the tumour has not shrunk. It's still 6.5 centimetres in diameter. And I was really deflated by it because I really thought with everything I was doing, all the cruciferous vegetables, vegan diet, just everything. And there's many more things I haven't even spoke about. Colonic hydrotherapy. I was doing like twice a week to clean out the gut, because I discovered that gut health is of prime importance to boost the immune system, but just for digestion and for overall health is vital. And I was doing these far infrared saunas, not steam saunas, but these high-tech saunas, 2 or 3 times a week on the days I wasn't doing the colonics. And I thought, surely to goodness, this has got to produce a result. We've got to be able to see it. So I was really deflated, and I said, okay, well, what's the good news? He said, it hasn't grown and it hasn't spread. And I said, oh, is that good news? He said, it is actually good news. He said, because these things have a tendency to grow. And he said, honestly, I was expecting yours to have grown, hoping it wouldn't have, but from my vast experience, I was expecting it would have grown beyond the 6.5 centimeters. He said, so it is not a bad thing, Rob, that it's actually the same size. So I wasn't really consoled by it, but I said, okay, well, I hear what you're saying. Walked out of the office feeling deflated. But getting back to walking out of the GP's office after this second scan, really I was at another fork crossroads, I suppose you'd call it, where I had a choice now. It's like, okay, this isn't working, because that was a thought that crossed my mind. Maybe I should do this surgery, or what? I'm going to double down and go harder on this thing. And for some reason, maybe it's just my optimistic tendency, because I always believe every problem has a solution. I thought, no, I'm going to double down. I'm going to go harder on this. I do believe in this. I do believe in the body's self-healing capacity, especially after seeing that Cambridge University video. I must say that was a turning point for me. That was a catharsis. I went back to Dr. Chris and he said, yeah, I agree with the GP. It's not the worst news. But anyway, listen, Rob, I've got to go to Cyprus for 3 weeks because it's a Greek origin. I thought, oh no, don't leave me. I was kind of needy. And he said, no, you'll be right. Stick to the protocols I'll put you on. You are on the right track. I went, okay, all right, well, I value your help and I'm sad you're going. He said, 3 weeks is not long, I'll be back. But then I thought, he's been good, but maybe it's time to find new mentorship. So I was in that sort of frame of mind. Some days I felt really energized and the body must have been detoxing, I guess, or whatever it's doing. And then other days I felt still sick as a dog. And so I thought, I need to find a new mentor. Also, I need a change of state. I can't just sit in front of this computer. It was a sunny day. Dr. Chris was saying sunshine is medicine, vitamin D, all that sort of stuff. And so I thought, I'm going to go for a walk down the street to the children's playground where there's swings, roundabouts and slippery dips. And because I love when children are laughing and screaming, it uplifts your mind, which does good things to your soul and your body. I went down on this park bench and I looked across the road. Sure enough, there were kids laughing and screaming, by the way. Made me feel good. Looked across the road and there's this building with red paint all over it and white writing. And the white writing said, don't panic, go organic. I thought, that's interesting. I was looking for a change of membership. Anyway, it said dairy-free, gluten-free, sugar-free. I thought, that's not a normal fruit and veggie shop. Free coconut, every purchase over $10. Far infrared sauna, $10. By this stage, I'm getting curious as hell, thinking, why on earth would you have a sauna in produce store? That makes no sense to me at all. So I was just curious, obviously, I wandered across and met this fellow, Pete Mello, who's 6'4", tall, muscly, slim. I thought he was 35 years old, but I later found out he was 50 years old. So he looked much, much younger than his age. And in fact, he later told me, only trust a medical practitioner or a healing practitioner who looks the part. I thought, yeah, okay, that's common sense, but I hadn't thought of it, so it must be uncommon sense. And this fellow, now what month we're in? We're in May, late April, which is where in Sydney, Australia, the weather's getting cooler, but he's dressed in a tank top, shorts and barefoot. And I discovered he wears that right through the year, right through the middle of winter. So he's sort of like an Amazon man. Very unusual fellow, very extreme fellow in a good way. People sometimes call him Crazy Pete because he's so far removed from the conventional mainstream medicine and pharmacy and all that sort of thing. So anyway, he said, okay, what have you got? I said, well, I've got cancer. He said, cancer's one of the easiest illnesses to cure, which I'd sort of heard from the previous integrative doctor, but not quite as directly as that. He said, anyway, cancer's just a star sign. And I laughed. I thought, I like this guy, he's quirky. Cancer's just a star sign. And I knew he didn't mean literally, he's just being playful. Then he said, okay, tell me, what do doctors do? I said, I don't know, I'm not good with riddles. He said, they doctor people, they tamper with their bodies. I said, that's pretty harsh. He said, well, think about it. What do they want to do to you? I said, they wanted to remove my kidney. He said, exactly. And why didn't you do it? I said, because I think it's barbaric. He said, exactly. And he said, and why do they do this? I said, just tell me the answer. Just tell me, Pete. He said, because they've been indoctrinated to do it. And this was before that documentary Indoctrination came out. Now, some people would think, this guy's crazy, I'm better to go back to a proper doctor who's wearing a white suit and all the letters after their name. But there's something about me that likes colourful characters. I was looking for new mentorship and now I found. But then he started to say, okay, are you detoxifying? I said, well, I don't know. What do you mean? He said, have you heard of zeolite, bentonite clay, diatomaceous earth? I said, you're speaking another language. I've got no idea what you're talking about. He said, well, there are substances that can remove toxins from your body. They can remove heavy metals. If you've been eating fish, there'd be mercury in it these days, unfortunately. They remove viruses, bacteria, fungus, all this sort of thing. We should get you onto this. And I said, where do I get them? He said, they're over there on the shelf in my store. And he wasn't trying to do a sales pitch. I could tell the way he talked. He was just genuinely trying to help me. And then I mentioned to him that I had two friends who are famous rock stars in Australia. One of them, I think, was famous internationally and in America, who also had cancer. One of them had a brain tumor and the other had prostate cancer. He said, why don't we get the three of you together? I'll give you the complete rundown, what I believe cancer really is and how you got sick in the first place and how you can cure yourself. And so we arranged a meeting with all three of us, plus the partner of one of them, so four of us, plus Pete, five of us. And he gave us a 3-hour consultation, free of charge, which I thought was so generous and so kind. He's coming from the right place. And the meeting, I thought I knew a bit about healing and what it was about, but it blew my mind. It was so informative. I had so many symptoms, it was making me feel like I was dying. It was just so painful. Sometimes there were 2 or 3 nights in a row I couldn't sleep. I was in so much agony, not pain, agony, just sheer agony. But that turned out to be fortunate when I was on the recovery path, because one by one I could feel and see with my eyes the symptoms disappearing. I could see the massive rash on my left leg diminishing to half the size, a quarter the size. And one day I woke up and it had completely gone. And I actually then divorced myself completely from the modern allopathic medical system and thought, I don't need it anymore. I don't believe it. I don't want it. I can tell I don't need their scans and their blood tests. And I'm not denigrating those. For those that feel they're appropriate and wish to do, that's their personal choice. I'm a big fan of freedom of choice. But for me, I didn't need it anymore. And then that lump on my back started to diminish and my nausea, the fatigue. In fact, I started to experience massive surges in energy, which eventually became massive surges in creativity. And then I actually was in such good physical health, I thought, well, where do we go from here? I hadn't fully recovered. We're talking about mid-2013, about 6 months after my diagnosis. I was in such good physical and mental shape and emotional shape. I thought, well, what's next? Like I was always wanting to go to the next level. Well, I still had good days and bad days. In the early stages, I had 7 bad days a week out of 7. Just terrible. By mid-year, it was probably down to 1 or 2 bad days a week, depending on what was going on in my body, because your body is frantically, furiously working to heal itself, and it's just genius what it's doing. Still, I don't think we really fully appreciate the amazing things it's doing. It's holistic. When your kidney's healing, it's not just the kidney, it's your liver, it's your gallbladder, it's your lungs, your heart, it's your brain, it's your blood system. It's just everything working like a team, like a city of people, all harmoniously working together to achieve common goal, which is to cure you. And this is honestly how I now think of the human body. Not before I got sick. This is my new concept of what the human body is. It was 13 months after diagnosis. I was diagnosed on late January 2013. And I knew I was completely free of cancer, 100% free by February the 19th, 2014. So 13 months later, what would have been my father's 85th birthday, just as an aside. How did I know? So on February the 19th, 2014, I was shopping in Pete's organic produce store. He wasn't there, but his lovely staff were there. And he walks in, 6'4", towering, puts his arms out like a savior, like Jesus or something, and said, Robert Pryor, I officially pronounce you cured. And I was kind of shocked by that. And I sort of laughed and said, do you know what, Pete? I think you've nailed it. This last week has been 7 good days and no bad days for the first time. He said, I told you. I said, how did you know? Because this is without any scans or blood tests or anything. He said, intuition. He said, your skin complexion is fantastic. Your aura is glowing. You're radiating with energy and vibrancy, and you've lost weight, the tone of your voice. He said, you just look and sound, feel amazing. You've done it. I can tell you, you're in the clear. So it was verifying what I already knew, but it's good to hear it from somebody else, and especially someone that I trusted and was so grateful to. He was my mentor, he's my hero. But then I thought, well, that's not enough. Let's go back to the integrated doctor with his Hunter metapathia scans, which showed that the 6s, which demonstrated very poor health, had gone down to 1s and 2s in the liver and the kidney and in every organ in the body. So I had faith in technology. So there's technology for you. And then I did it again. It was actually 4 years after my recovery. I thought I should do it because I was running some little seminars in my local vicinity to give people a bit of guidance and just to share my story. And I thought I better have something tangible to show. And then I did it again this year, early 2022, at a different place that also had metapathia. But I also had iridology scans where they look into your eye with a torch and the eye is a map. And that was amazing because the iridologist said, I'm seeing that your right kidney was terminal. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you could have died from some issue with the kidney. I don't know what it was, something pretty serious with your right kidney. I said, go on. He said, but I'm also seeing that it's now gone and that potential no longer exists. I didn't tell him what it was. I thought, if this is supposed to be so accurate, you tell me the acid test. And he nailed it. So that was another test. But then the other goes back to what Pete was saying. All my symptoms are gone. And surely, to goodness, if that's not a diagnosis, what is? No headaches, no anxiety, no nausea, no fatigue. My energy was surging to the point where I was back to music, which I've left behind 35 years, writing songs, recording songs, putting a band together, performing live. And that's why I call the book The Healing Power of Cancer. It transformed me into a vibrant, healthy person, more healthy, mind, body, and spirit than I was when I was diagnosed or on the downward spiral. So it was actually a blessing, one of the greatest things that could ever happen to me. Sounds insane, but I really believe that because of the path that I chose, not in and of itself. And then the whole mind, body, and spirit detox made me become human, superhuman.